Why did millennials become so radical during the latter half of like as they entered their late 20s and like mid 30s? I think the primary reason for this is because like they're mostly rebels without a cause. For the most part, for most of their lives, their entire culture agreed with them. In fact, most millennial culture was manufactured by like corporate interests. Even things that had you could say genuinely came from like left wing causes that opposed corporate interests were subsumed by corporate interests or just supported by them outright. Their entire value system and taboo structure is completely supported by establishment interests, whether it's anti-racism, sexism, being against sexism, being against homophobia was like a big thing during like the late 2000s, early 2010s, like Lady Gaga, Born This Way and stuff. Same Love by I think Macklemore. All those kind of songs that were like popular among millennials, and they're like almost like millennial generational anthems. If the baby boomer generational anthem was like the civil rights movement, the millennial generational anthem was like pro-gay, basically. I was gonna say LGBT, but it was mostly like pro-gay. And I think a lot of the trans stuff and the non-binary stuff had to do with the fact that they're essentially rebels without a cause. Millennials are a generation stuck in history, like they are trapped in history. It's like they're constantly standing still. They couldn't move forward because history agreed with them. There was no like tension to move the society forward, so I think they had to manufacture it themselves. Like a lot of the ideas that they came up with wound up being extremely unpopular, or they were extremely fringe, or they were extremely specific to the individual, and they had no broad popular support. Like the gender stuff, how there are thousands, hundreds, thousands, even possibly millions of genders, and everyone's gender is particular to the individual person. It's like millennials had this desire to manufacture conflict in their lives. They are a generation stuck in history. They were anyway. Donald Trump, the rise of Donald Trump during the mid 2010s, it gave them like an adversary to fight. It gave them their Voldemort, their antagonist. And I think part of the reason why there was this obsession with Trump is because Trump in a way gave their lives meaning. Millennials, for the most part, they lived meaningless lives that were full of meaning. It's kind of contradictory, but it's like they were the culture. The culture, the institutions, the corporations all agree with them. And because they all agree with them, their lives are sort of like meaningless. But Trump, he was like this puppet. I almost saw him in the beginning, like people almost saw him, I think most serious people saw him almost like as like a paper tiger. Just this like thing that they could, like this foil that they could use. But I think most people didn't understand just how like backwards or like just how uninformed a lot of our country could be. I mean, the Trump phenomenon, it had a lot of like serious concerns running in this undercurrent. And how Trump got elected initially was a combination of a lot of factors. And the online culture war, which I'll probably make a video on soon, the impact it had on the Trump phenomenon cannot be understated. The current Trump phenomenon is a shadow of the Trump phenomenon that initially gave rise to him during the period, I would say between 2013 or 2012, around there, all the way to his election. What the current Trump phenomenon is a shadow of it. And the online culture, if it existed today in the 2020s, it would be the perfect foil for the millennial psyche. It would be the perfect thing that millennials could use to give their lives the ultimate sense of meaning and satisfaction. Like after they die, after they were old, they would feel like, yes, we did this. It would be their civil rights movement. I think the gay issue didn't quite cut it. The baby boomers and the civil rights movement, it changed almost like the trajectory of human civilization, kind of. There was what we call Western civilization, pre like the civil rights movement, I guess, but really it was more like the movement for African American rights. It predates the civil rights movement, but I'm getting ahead of myself. There was civilization before that, and there was what we call Western civilization after that. The gay issue was not quite at that scale, but the online culture movement that existed in the 2010s, had it not been squashed and censored and strangled in this crib, it would have been the perfect foil for the millennial psyche. And perhaps it was best that it was strangled in this crib. A lot of the elements of that culture, of that online counterculture, probably could challenge the neoliberal world order. It probably could have. And it probably could challenge millennial cultural dominance. But really, millennial cultural dominance is really just neoliberal cultural dominance. Millennials really do not, they really have no power in this world. They're basically like subjects of this all-encompassing consensus that is neoliberalism. Even when millennials try to resist neoliberalism, they simply reinforce it. They were molded by it. They were born into it, and they are generations removed from the inception of it. So they have no frame of reference in which they can base an idea of normalcy without the neoliberal world order. But anyway, back to the main topic, which is millennials, and I think looking back, I think millennials are going to be seen as almost like a lost generation.